By viewer request, we're out here taking a look at the 2016 Audi Q3. This is Audi's smallest and least expensive crossover vehicle in the United States. At $33,700, this is also one of the least expensive Audis, period, in the US. Audi's A3 starts at about $30,700. This is just about $3,000 more. The model we're testing today is an essentially fully loaded Q3, which means we do get the full LED headlamps. Now, even base models of the Q3 get xenon headlamps, so you do get up-level headlamps versus a lot of the competitors out there that start with halogen beams. At just under 173 inches long, this is relatively short for the US crossover market. This is right about the same length as the Range Rover Evoque. That means this is 10 inches shorter than an Audi Q5 or a Lexus NX. A lot of people want to put the Lexus NX and the Audi Q3 in the same category, but that's not actually correct. The NX competes with the Audi Q5 and the Volvo XC60, which is longer than this. BMW's current generation X1 is about 4 inches longer than the model we're taking a look at right here, but I do expect the 2016 model to get a hair shorter. BMW hasn't released full specs in that vehicle yet, but downsizing does seem to be a trend for the X1. BMW's current generation X1, which is the rear-wheel drive model, is about 4 inches longer than the Q3 we're taking a look at right here, and the Lincoln Mkc is actually 7 inches longer. The Mkc is another frequently misunderstood vehicle. It actually competes with the Lexus NX and the Q5 as well. It doesn't necessarily compete with the Q3. Out back, we get some angry LED tail lamps, and we have dual exhaust tips right there on the driver's side only. The rear, like the rest of the Audi lineup, is a little bit plain compared to some of the entries in this segment, but we do get this sort of honeycomb effect trim right down here for the rear parking sensors. In case you're wondering, these modules down here house the backup lights and the rear fog lamps. This is a European vehicle, so we do get rear fog lamps, and those do make it to the US market. If these tires look awfully large to you for a crossover that's this size, then you're right. These are 255/40R19 tires. They are very, very wide for an SUV in this particular category. The interesting thing about the Q3 is that all of the top-end trims, either front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive, do get these tires, and they're optional as well on the low-end trim. When I visited an Audi dealership locally to me, most of the vehicles on the lot did have these 255/40R19 tires, and they do affect the fuel economy and the handling of the vehicle, and the handling is affected in a very good way. Under the hood, we have just this one engine in the US. There are different engines available in other world markets. For us, we just get this 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder engine. It's relatively similar to what we see in the A3 and the Q5. Under this hood, however, the power is down a little bit versus most of the Audi vehicles. We get 200 horsepower and 207 pound-feet of torque. The engine is mated only to a 6-speed automatic transmission, and it sends power to the front wheels by default, or all four if you opt for a $2,100 all-wheel drive system. Our particular model does have the all-wheel drive. Although the Q3 is relatively light at just under 3,500 pounds, fuel economy is not terribly good for this segment. This comes in at 23 miles per gallon combined in the all-wheel drive model we're testing here, compared to the all-wheel drive competition that is 1 mile per gallon lower than the Range Rover Evoque at 24. BMW's X1 with the 2-liter turbocharged engine gets 26, and the brand new Mercedes GLA, thanks to its new engine and 7-speed dual-clutch transmission, gets 27 miles per gallon combined. The big difference that you'll note across the board is that all the rest of the competition has more gears in their transmission. The Mercedes has a 7-speed, the BMW has an 8-speed, and the Range Rover Evoque has a 9-speed. This segment is interesting because at the moment BMW's X1 is the only vehicle in this segment with a near-perfect 50-50 weight balance and rear-wheel drive. But that's very different for 2016 because BMW's X1 is going front-wheel drive. That's because BMW is harmonizing the development of their Mini product line and the BMW X1, so it will have a transverse mounted engine. Now, this is also different than what you find under the hood of the Q5, the A4, the A6, A7, A8, etc., because the engine is actually mounted across the engine bay in this particular fashion, not north-south in the engine bay like you find in those other Audi products. Now, you may think that that's a disadvantage for the Q3, but it actually ends up being an advantage because the way Audi's Quattro system works in the A4, A6, etc., the engine has to be entirely in front of the front axle, and actually a portion of the transmission is also in front of the front axle. In this vehicle, we actually get less of the engine in front of the front axle than in the A4. Front seat comfort comes in at 10 out of 10 points. These are extremely comfortable base seats because they are leather standard, they're heated standard, and we get a 4-way adjustable lumbar support as standard in the Q3, all of which are very unique options. We also have a tilt telescopic steering column with a large range of motion. In terms of front seat legroom, we also have very similar legroom numbers to the next size category up, which would be Audi's Q5. Also aiding front seat comfort, our model has extending thigh cushions for the driver and the front passenger. Obviously, whenever you make a car smaller, the rear seats are going to suffer, and that's true in the Q3. However, the difference is not as big as you might think. I still have about 3 inches of legroom left there, and I have an enormous amount of headroom for a vehicle this small. That's all thanks to the very upright profile we get in the Q3. I still have about 2 inches of headroom, even though we are in the model with the panoramic moonroof. Now I say that because the panoramic moonroof may be standard in the US, but it's not standard in all countries out there. Now on the downside, the rear doors are quite small, so the door opening you can see really does take some getting used to. The door opening right here is actually a little bit further inboard than the seat back itself, so you actually have to move up a little bit in order to get out of the door, and you may hit your head right here on this pillar. But actually being in the vehicle is quite comfortable for a 6-foot tall adult. Moving all the way over to the right side of the vehicle, I had a 6'5" passenger back here. You can see I still have 1.5 inches of legroom left here. Now a lot of that's down to the way the dashboard is shaped in the Q3, because it's actually possible to put a 6-foot passenger up front and a rearward facing child seat in the back, and I was not able to do that in the Q5. Now that really surprised me because there is less combined legroom in this vehicle than in the Q5, but because of the way the dashboard is shaped, I can actually push this front seat much further forward, allowing me to actually put that child seat in the back. Now the back seat is obviously not as wide as the Q5 or anything in that segment, so I wasn't able to put 3 child seats across. If you want to know more about that, click on that child seat video. We do have a center armrest with cup holders right there and a very small storage cubby inside. We also have a trunk pass-through for skis and other long items. Now the seat backs do fold in a 60-40 folding fashion, not a 40-20-40 folding fashion like you see in some, and they fold almost completely flat with the cargo area. Thanks to the generous amount of headroom, I can almost sit comfortably in this center seat. I can definitely do it if I lean all the way back in the seat. If I'm sitting a little bit further forward, then my hair is definitely brushing the ceiling, and if I'm sitting upright, my head is definitely touching the ceiling. But again, keep in mind the Q3 is quite a bit smaller than that next size category up. The dimensional difference between the Q3 and the Q5 has to be made up somewhere, and it's made up right back here in the cargo area, because we get about 35% less cargo room in this vehicle than we get in the Q5. We also get a much less practically shaped cargo area. If you take a look at where the seat back ends, which is right around here, it's just about the hatch opening at the top. And that means we get about the same kind of cargo space in the back as we find in your average mid-size sedan. We can obviously put 24 and 26-inch roller bags just barely in this particular position, and I was able to fit a second 24-inch roller bag right there behind that one 24-inch roller bag, but you can see that cargo space is definitely more limited than that next size up. We do have a standard tonneau cover, which is very easy to use, but it is quite small, as you can see, because of the overall size of the cargo area. Scooting that luggage further into the vehicle, you can see that we have a decent amount of storage space when you consume the rear seat area, and we also have a compact spare tire in the trunk. To save space, this is also where they put the subwoofer in our particular model. When it comes to my exclusive trunk comfort index, I'm going to have to give this 6 out of 10 points because it's notably less comfortable than the next size category up. We still have a power tailgate, however. Let's start off our interior tour right here with the panoramic sunroof. Now this is standard in all models, and it does use this semi-translucent fabric, which actually allows a lot of light in. It did give me a little bit of a headache, and it also makes the interior a little bit warmer than some of the competition. Moving over to the front seats, we have two-way adjustable headrests, just up and down, and then we have height adjustable seat belts for both the driver and the front passenger. There are 2 different seat designs available in the Q3, but all of them are actually using real leather. That's a little bit different than some of the competition, which starts out with imitation leather. As I've been saying, the Q3 is a relatively small vehicle. When you take a look at something like a Q5, the front doors are larger. And so even though we only have about 1 inch less front legroom than we find in the Q5, this front door is considerably smaller. So if you're a taller person, the seat is all the way back in its tracks, your elbow is going to be kind of around here. You can see where that armrest actually starts. That's why we get that cutout on the pillar. This is basically the same as every other entry in this segment. It's just a fact of life when you get an SUV that's this small. The front doors are composed of mostly soft touch plastic. We have soft touch plastic all the way down the door. The only hard plastics you'll really find will be this handle right here and the inside of the storage cubby. Because we're in the up-level model with the Bose sound system, we actually get lighted front speaker grills right there. That's not a reflection, that actually is lighting around that also chrome rim right there around that Bose speaker at the bottom of the door. We also get a mid-range speaker right there behind the door handle, and then moving further up the door you will find a tweeter integrated right there into the A-pillar. Moving over to the dashboard, our model has this metal trim. Wood trim is optionally available, and it's definitely something that I would get. I think it really dresses up the cabin of the Q3. Some people have complained that this cabin is a little bit too Spartan, a little bit too simple, but I actually kind of like the lines. I really like it with the wood better, however. We do get a moderately sized glove box that was not able to fit a tablet computer inside. In a style very similar to the rest of the Audi lineup, we have our infotainment screen right here in the center of the dashboard. This is using the latest Audi MMI software without finger writing recognition. We have two large air vents right there below that, and our particular model is the optional MMI system with navigation. The MMI system works very much the same as every other MMI system in the Audi lineup, except that the controls are in kind of a different location. They're right here on the dash rather than down there on the center console. We have all the same sorts of things going on. We have contextual buttons right here, which actually light up when you're on that particular option, then direct access buttons to tune, car, media, radio, navigation, etc. We also get two SD card slots, a SIM card for our data services, and a single disc optical player. Below that, we have our standard dual zone climate control. This may look like a manual system, but these are actually just digital toggles. That's how they work right there. We have a full auto mode, of course. The Audi Drive Select button allows us to change certain drivetrain settings between auto, dynamic, and comfort. We have our traction control enable disable button, parking sense button, and then a hill descent control button right there. Continuing our way down, we have our start stop button because we have keyless go, and then we have a very traditional shifter all the way down for sport, one notch up for drive, over to the right for the manual mode, up for up, and down for down. Behind that, we have two very large cup holders, a 12-volt power outlet, and our electronic parking brake. Continuing all the way back, we have a softly padded center armrest. It is very nice and squishy, as you can see. It also slides forward and ratchets into position to help find a more comfortable spot. It opens completely to reveal a relatively small storage cubby right there. I was only able to fit two phones and a wallet right there inside. Over on the driver's side, we have a very typical Audi white-faced instrument cluster. It is a 4-dial arrangement with the tachometer, speedometer, engine temperature, and of course, fuel level. Right there in the middle, our model has the optional color multi-information display. The standard one is not color. That display is controlled via this button arrangement on the steering wheel. We change categories backwards there. We have a menu button, scroll to select, and then click down for OK. Taking a closer look at that display, we have our eco options right here. It's telling us how much we would save if we turned off the air conditioner, for instance, at the moment. We can cycle through to our navigation display that would be active if we had navigation active. We have our phone interface for our Bluetooth phone interface, media interface, and then of course back to that trip computer. If I select the menu button, we can actually choose between several different things. We can have our typical onboard computer interface right there for trip A, trip B, that sort of thing right there. We can also get a digital speedometer readout, large and bold in the middle, and then we can of course have the display darkened, which really just means turn off except for those options on the bottom. Zooming out to the steering wheel, we have this almost 3-spoke steering wheel design. You can see that we have aggressive sport grips on the steering wheel down here and right up here as well, with bumps right up there. Our model has the optional paddle shifters on the back, up on the right, down on the left. This is a button that can be reassigned in the MMI system. Right now it's programmed to go track forward, mute, volume up, down, voice command button, and a repeat last navigation instruction button. Like many of the luxury options out there, we have a lot of stalks on the steering wheel. So on the right-hand side right here, we have the stalk for the windshield wipers, both front and rear. On the left, we have our turn signal stalk and headlamp stalk, and then we have a cruise control stalk right down there as well. In kind of an interesting twist, Audi puts their blind spot information system enable disable button right here on the A-pillar. And as you can see right there, the system actually has the status light on the outside of the vehicle. You can see it through the window. It actually is a lot easier to see in person than it is on the camera. It's an interesting place to put that little button rather than in the center console. One thing you'll notice on the driver's side is that we don't have any memory buttons for the driver's seat. That's something that we also see in the Audi A3. The power moonroof is standard in all US-bound models, and in an interesting twist, you can actually open the moonroof with this button right here. You can actually see it sliding back like that without actually opening that cover as well. The cover is a completely separate button, so we'll hit this button right here, and then that shade will actually open separately. Not exactly clear why that is the way that it is, but I kind of like the ability to choose. The first thing you'll notice about the Q3 out on the road is a hair of turbo lag from a stop, and then we have a relatively deep first gear. That means we get decent low-end acceleration. However, by the time 60 rolls around, this is a decent amount slower than basically every other entry in this segment. 0 to 60 happens in about 7.7 seconds, which is a little bit faster than the manufacturer says you're going to get, but not terribly swift overall. Most of the entries in this segment hover just over 7 seconds. Now you may be wondering how that's possible. It's all down to the transmission design. This is basically the only entry in this segment left with a 6-speed automatic transmission. The Mercedes-Benz does use a 7-speed dual-clutch transmission, which is quite efficient. BMW, of course, uses an 8-speed automatic transmission, and the Range Rover Evoque uses a 9-speed automatic transmission. We also get more power out of some of those engines out there, most notably the Bmw X1. Now, of course, the Bmw X1 for 2015 does have that 3-liter turbocharged engine in it, and we're not going to get that in the 2016 calendar year. However, we are told that the 2016 X1 should be a hair faster than the base version of the X1 now. Although acceleration is lackluster in the Q3, handling is absolutely incredible, and I'm going to give this an A+, because the only vehicle that really outhandles this is the incredibly light and rear-wheel drive BMW X1, but only in certain trims. The handling ability in the Q3 has an awful lot to do with the general design of the vehicle, but also the light curb weight and those seriously wide tires that we get. Handling is so good in this vehicle that on my favorite winding mountain road, I was actually able to get myself car sick behind the wheel. That doesn't happen in very many vehicles. This easily outhandles the Evoque, it outhandles the GLA 250. Don't expect the BMW X1 for 2016 to really handle that much better because, of course, 2016 is bringing a front-wheel drive version of the X1. Braking is incredibly good in the Q3 thanks to the light curb weight and the really wide tires. I'm definitely going to give this an A+. Now, in general, I tend to prefer vehicles that stop quickly and handle well to vehicles that go terribly fast. That really plays into the handling abilities. When out on gravel roads like we're on right here, the Q3 is definitely firm, but it's not as firm as you might think. This is still a little bit softer than something like a Range Rover Evoque. The suspension is very well composed on roads like this, and I'd actually say that I'm a little bit surprised that the ride is not firmer than it actually is because we have such wide tires on this particular model. Again, these are 255 width tires. Now, none of this type of compact crossover is really designed for true off-road work, and that's true for the Q3 as well. This obviously has an all-wheel drive system, but it's designed more for soft-roading than off-roading. Now, you may be wondering how it's possible for a small crossover like this to get such good numbers when it comes to handling, as well as have a decent ride. A lot of it's down to the weight. In general, when you make a vehicle lighter, you don't have to make the suspension quite as stiff and as punishing in order to get the same kind of handling objectives out of it. That's a very generalized comment, and it does depend an awful lot on the suspension geometry of the vehicle and just the overall design from the vehicle manufacturer. Back out here on the paved road, we have a ride that is definitely tuned towards the sportier side of things. You can tell that the Q3 is a light vehicle. We don't have a whole lot of body roll. You can really enter corners like this an awful lot faster than you can in an awful lot of SUVs out there. I'm going to give cabin noise an A. It came in at 71 decibels, which is a very respectable measurement for a luxury crossover vehicle. Now, I did find the Range Rover Evoque to be a hair quieter. In addition to acceleration being slightly lackluster, fuel economy is also a little bit disappointing. This has the lowest fuel economy numbers of any entry in this particular segment, and in fact, it actually has the same combined fuel economy score as the Audi Q5, which is faster and more powerful. Some of that has to do with the engine design, but I suspect a large amount of that has to do with the 6-speed automatic that we get. The Q5 uses essentially the same engine, tuned for a little bit more power, but it also uses a newer 8-speed automatic. If you take a look at Mercedes GLA 250, its fuel economy numbers come in at 27 miles per gallon according to the EPA, and the last time I tested one, it came in right around 28, so that is significantly better. The Q3 is one of the most fun luxury crossovers to drive out on the road. It all has to do with the excellent suspension tuning, the grippy tires, the excellent handling dynamics, etc. This is the kind of chassis that could really handle an awful lot more power, and of course Audi is going to do that in Europe with an RS Q3. However, they haven't said whether that will come to the US or not. That will get their over 300 horsepower 5-cylinder turbocharged engine. That does look to be an awful lot of fun. The Q3 starts at $33,700, and there are essentially two different trim lines. There's the Premium Plus, and then there's the Prestige model. The model we're taking a look at here is the upper Prestige model. The Premium Plus is very well equipped in this segment. It has a lot of standard equipment that you don't find in the competition, including leather seats. Leather seats are becoming less and less common in base models. A lot of manufacturers are using essentially pleather instead. We also get heated seats, that 12-way driver's seat, 2-zone climate control, and the panoramic roof, all standard on that $33,700 model. If you want all-wheel drive, just tack on $2,100. If you want the Prestige model right here, that starts at $38,600 for the front-wheel drive model. And the model I think that I would take would be about $37,500. That would be the Premium Plus model with the Sport package and the 19-inch wheels. I'd probably also get the optional wood interior package because that does dress up the cabin a little bit more than the model we're testing here. Let's start off with BMW's X1. The X1 is getting a little bit old lately because it is due to be replaced in the 2016 calendar year with that front-wheel drive model I've been talking about. However, at the moment, you will find the rear-wheel drive BMW X1 starting at $31,200, which is less than the Q3. Now, it handles better, it's a little bit less expensive. I think I like the overall style of the X1 better as well. However, it's really not as good of a deal because we actually get about $4,900 more standard equipment in the Q3 than we get in the X1. That means the Q3 really is less expensive, especially if you're going to comparably equip your X1, and I think that most people would. I think that most people would add at least a few options to that X1, and that actually gets you more expensive than the base Q3. Now, interestingly enough, the handling difference between the Q3 and the X1 is a lot smaller than you might think. And it's all down to the tires that we get on this particular model. It really doesn't cost that much as an option to get these wide tires and 19-inch wheels on the Q3. I would definitely do it. It makes this car handle like it's on rails. Now, unfortunately, the X1 does get better fuel economy than we get in the Q3 regardless of the version you get. And if you're after more power, of course, BMW has that 3-liter turbocharged engine. If you're after the option that looks a little bit more crossover-y, then the Q3 would be the model for you because it does have that crossover shape. And the X1 was BMW's first attempt at a very small crossover in this segment, but it comes across more as a jacked-up hatchback than something like this in terms of overall shape. I would say it actually looks a little bit more thematically like Volvo's V60 Cross Country. The Mercedes GLA 250 is about $1,200 less than this, but we get about $2,000 less standard equipment. And that means this is a better deal than the GLA 250 as well. The GLA handles very well, and I would say that the handling feel is slightly superior to the Q3, although the absolute handling numbers are not actually better, especially if you get the optional tires that we have on this particular model. This will outhandle a GLA 250. Now, Mercedes does have that AMG version of the GLA, which is very tasty. It's also very, very fast, much faster than we're seeing right here. The GLA is pretty rapid off the block. It also gets excellent fuel economy, but those two things are due to its 7-speed dual-clutch transmission, and that 7-speed DSG is probably the least smooth transmission in this segment. I think the overall exterior and interior on the GLA are also a little bit more attractive than the Q3. However, that transmission is a big, big problem for me. I also don't find Mercedes-Benz command system to be quite as intuitive as the MMI system we get in this, and if you start adding options to your GLA 250, it can get quite expensive compared to the Audi. Now, in case you are wondering about Lincoln Mkc comparisons, the Mkc is right around $300 apart from this model, although it has $3,000 less equipment. Now, the Mkc is larger on the inside. Again, I said it's about 7 inches longer overall than the Q3. That places it more along the lines of the Q5 in terms of overall size than the Q3. However, if we're talking about deals, the Mkc is a better deal for the size vehicle than we get in the Q3. It's just not the same kind of vehicle. As you'd expect from that next size category up, we also get more power out of the Mkc because it does have 2 engine options, and the upper level one does have considerably more power than we get in this vehicle. The Land Rover Range Rover Evoque is also a very different kind of vehicle. It's $8,000 to $14,000 more than the Q3. Now, the reason for that is it's trying to be the very premium entry in this segment. We get considerably more customization options on the inside than we get in any of the other vehicles in this category. We don't necessarily get more power or more handling prowess, but we do get an awful lot of additional luxury features on the inside. I think the seats are a little bit more comfortable. Everything looks a little bit more premium. There's more wood trim. There's more leather going on the inside, but you will obviously pay dearly for that when it comes to the sticker price. In terms of overall driving dynamics, the Evoque is just not quite as dialed in as the Q3. It is faster because we do get more power and we get that 9-speed automatic transmission. It just does not drive as well as this vehicle. The ZF 9-speed automatic in the Evoque improves your 0 to 60 times, and it also improves your highway fuel economy. It's just not as dynamic of a partner as the 6-speed we get in this. The Q3 is certainly the best value in this segment. It's also one of the best handling vehicles in this segment. So if you're after best value or best handling, this is definitely in the running. Now, I think the current generation BMW X1 is a little bit more exciting. However, it is a little bit more dated as well. And I think for the 2015 model year, I would take the X1, especially that 3-liter turbocharged version. But for the 2016 model year, I suspect I'd take the Q3. Thanks for taking the time to check out this video. Again, I'm Alex Dykes, and this has been the 2016 Q3. Go ahead and check out those related videos down there on the bottom of your screen. Subscribe to this channel. Find me over at facebook.com and at Twitter, and I'll see you next week.